In this lesson, we're going to work with the Mila shader, and we're going to work on developing a look for our model. All right, the first thing I want to do is I want to change my namespaces because they're going to kind of get in the way. So I'm going to go to General Editors, and I'm going to Namespace Editor. And I'm going to click on Environment, and I'm going to basically go to Select Contents. Then I'm going to go to Root, and I'm going to Add Selected, and that's going to get rid of all of my namespaces of all of our objects. All right, so once I've done that, I'm also going to take this group and I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer for it. And I'll call this BG layer. And we'll hit save. And I'll reference it so I don't accidentally grab it. All right, so I'm going to grab my plain geo group and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. And I'm going to do that through my render cam. Oops, so I'm just rotate it in Y. And then I'm going to center my render cam center it in my viewport. And I'm going to give it a smooth preview. And then let's go to our, this is kind of good on what we're shooting for here. I'm also in my render settings, because I've imported this into a new file, I'm going to go down and I'm going to change my render options and undo my default light. And I'm going to go to quality. And I'm going to change this to, I'm going to turn on Final Gather here. And we'll do a quick render. And I realized that I forgot to do this through my, I'm going to pause that. I always have to go through Snapshot and go to Render Cam. There, that way I know I've got what I've got. So I'll click Render and I'll pause this while it's rendering. And we have a render time of 36 seconds on the MIA shader with no bump map, just the specular component and everything like that. Okay, so that's important to note. We also have very grainy lights because we haven't changed our quality setting, which we'll do at the end. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and work with, go ahead and start setting up a Mila shader. And to do that, I'm going to bring up my hypergraph. Actually, let me go back to the render settings. I'm going to save this so that we know we've got it. And I'm going to go to my Hypershade, which, as we all know, they have kind of made the Hypershade integrated the node editor into it. And this is what my MIA material looks like with the interior neutral on, which is pretty close to what we have. I mean, you can always change these, but basically that's going to be about as close as it's going to get. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and clear my graph, and I'm going to go to Mental Ray Materials, and I'm going to bring up a Mila material. Now, the Mila material is designed to be a layered material that only gives you the properties you really need, be it subsurface scattering or anything like that, whereas the other shaders heretofore have actually forced you to kind of compute everything when you go to render. So since we've already got our wood texture engaged, this is in file 3, I'm just going to bring that in, and I'm going to go to my Mila material, which of course I'll rename as Wood Mila, and I'm going to take the wood color and I'm going to drop it into my color channel, just like that. Okay, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to update, but we can go to the property editor, and anything we have selected will show up in here. That's okay, but it does get a little bit much. Now we have an overall bump channel, we've got our color, we've got roughness, there's a lot of things we can do with this. All right, so once I've done that, then I'm going to need a bump, and I'm going to go ahead and put a bump on this base layer. Okay, now to do that, I'm going to have to do it kind of manually, because if you go to here, it doesn't quite work the way I'd expect. This way I know it works, and it gives us a little bit of work with the nodes here. Now, when I click on the bump 2D, you'd think, oh yeah, that should show up like it did in the Hypershade. No, for some reason it decides to put it way out there. So you got to go in there and connect it and pull it in manually, which I wish we didn't. But what it does let us do is we can drag this to there, and this automatically makes the out normal to bump connection. Now I can go to here and go to my bump value and bring a file node. Of course, it does it all the way down there, and we will pull this in, and I'll go to my source images folder and bring in the final bump. When we do that, this should get really kind of heavily pitted. So I'm going to go to my bump channel, and I'm going to go to bump depth, and I'm going to type in 0.1. which should work for us. Now, to apply this shader, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to materials, and since I've got my MI wood material already there, I'm going to select objects with this material, and that will select everything in my in my viewport that's got that material, and then I'm going to just assign the wood Mila to it. Okay, now once I've done that, I've gotten a pretty good, so we've got 36 seconds. I'm going to do another render, and I'm going to pause while I do it. And we see we've got 32 seconds, and we've got a wood material that has a bump, and it actually looks very satiny, and this is what you're looking for. Great. Let's leave it. We can leave it there as is, but what I think we're going to do is we're going to put a gloss coat on there. And so to do that, we'll add another layer. But 32 seconds, not bad for our render times. So let me, I'm going to hide this, see if it'll stay hidden. And I'm going to go to my wood Mila, and I'm going to scroll up to the top here. And I'm going to click on and make another layer. I'm going to make it a weighted layer, and I'm going to make it a specular reflection. Now, when I do that, this all of a sudden becomes glossy. And when it becomes glossy, of course, if we were to click on this and render it, we will see it looks like it's made out of metal. Okay, so that's not quite what we want, but all right. Well, we can go ahead and I'll go ahead and pause that. What we need to do here in our Hypershade is we need to change our weight value. Now, the values that you can change are the weight, the color, and the contribution. Now, we also, since we have the bump 2D here already, we can drop the bump into our bump channel, and it will break up our specular highlights maybe a little bit more. Now, I can change my weight value, and I'm going to pull this down to about 0.1. And let's take a look and see what it does to the shadows. Now, keep in mind, we can adjust our lighting. We can adjust the environment of our render cam. We can do all of those things to darken this. Okay, so weight, I'm going to really drop that weight down quite a bit. 0.02, like so. Okay, and that gives us a nice dark, gives us a little bit of reflection, but not a huge amount. I'll pause this, do another one back here where it's darker, see what that does. See if that makes it a huge amount of light. No, it doesn't. It gives us the specular highlight we want without lightening our shadows too much, and so that's good. You can also adjust the contribution that the direct light makes, as well as the indirect light. And you can play with those kind of on, I'll maybe take this down to 0.5 and see what it does down in here. And we should get a little bit of a highlight here. And yeah, it's still good and dark down below. Actually, no, it gives me a highlight, but not much. And that's the fact that the direct contribution is not there. I'll pop that back up. Okay, so that basically is our Mila shader. We've got a 2-layer shader, and we've got a shader that basically looks like wood with a varnished top coat. I'll do one last overall render, and of course we'll pause it in the middle. And we've got 40 seconds. We've got our choice of we've got a highly configurable specular layer. One last thing I'm going to do here before I stop is I want the cockpit. The cockpit currently looks like it's made of wood. I think I'm going to go ahead and give it another, I'm going to give it an MIA shader, simply because it's easy to configure. I'll use the Material X passes, and I'll call this cockpit material. Cockpit MIA. And I'll use one of the, I'll go ahead and assign it. Now we can also assign the material by going down to assign existing material and call it Cockpit MIA. And let's see here, we've got Cockpit MIA. I'm going to go ahead and graph this. cockpit MIA. And in order to access the presets, I have to go to my attribute editor. And I'll set the presets. I'm going to use a combination of glass solid, and I'm going to blend it 50% with frosted glass. Actually, let me try. Just going to replace this with frosted glass and see what I get. All right. So now let's see what we get. I'll just render this area in here. Click like so. And see what, yeah, there we go. That's pretty good looking. That looks like it's going to be a pretty good looking cockpit once it's done. Yes, I like that. That's good. So in this lesson, we set up our Mila shader, and we also gave the cockpit a nice little texture. In the next lesson, we'll create our assembly animation, and we'll have it all fly together in an animated form.